Victory at Ostagar by Arsenault de Blasonville. Chapter 5. King Cailan holds high revel. Bronwyn already knew that Alistair and Morrigan had somehow taken against each other. Breakfast confirmed it. You would find the moss upon a stone interesting. You know what's more interesting than that? Alistair shot back at Morrigan. Apostates. Mages outside the tower. That's illegal, you know. Perhaps I should make more tea, Bronwyn interposed. Alistair, more tea? Distracted, Alistair answered, Sounds good. Is there some more of that honey left? I really like that. Morrigan smirked at Bronwyn over her buttered bread, knowing what she was trying to do. Bronwyn knew that she would have to speak to them, separately and in private, about all these little digs and barbed words. They would poison the atmosphere and make their quest just that much harder to achieve. And they annoyed her personally. She hated that kind of hostile, nasty wittiness at someone else's expense. It all sounded like Father's description of the Orlesian court. So mean-spirited and relentlessly clever. Everyone watching everyone else like cats at a mouse hole, hoping to gain some advantage. Father had explained to her what a powerful weapon ridicule could be, but this tent was temporarily her home. It was not the court of the Empress of Orlais. They were off on a quest with the highest stakes, not to profit themselves, but to protect the people of Ferelden. They must work together, and to that end they must respect one another. It did not help that her nightmares last night had been ghastly and nearly continuous. She must find a way to deal with them. Maybe... Oh, Wynne! Come join us, Bronwyn called out when the mage made her appearance. What do you think of Fergus's condition this morning? His color seemed more normal to me. And Morrigan and Wynne had taken against each other, too. She saw it in the looks the two women exchanged as Wynne drew her chair up to the big wooden table. That was tiresome, because Wynne was giving Fergus the best care possible. Nothing must interfere with that. Her brother was hovering on the edge of consciousness. Occasionally his eyes would open, but he did not speak, or seem to recognize Bronwyn. The head injury was severe, and without magical intervention, Wynne thought it would have taken him months to recover, if he had recovered at all from it. At least Wynne had a smile for her. Much better indeed. I believe he will be able to speak to you by tomorrow. She glanced at Morrigan's usual clothing and remarked, So chilly this morning. I think I shall have to put on a heavier robe. And I think I shall take a walk in the bracing, refreshing air, Morrigan replied haughtily. 'Tis a lovely day. She got up and strolled out of the tent without another word. Not that I wish to seem interfering, Wardens, Wynne said quietly, sipping her tea. But I must urge you to be cautious around that young woman. She is an apostate, is she not? Bronwyn did not answer immediately, but Alistair had plenty to say. She and her mother both. Her mother is the Witch of the Wilds. If you ask me, Morrigan is a creepy piece of work. I gave my word to take Morrigan as a companion, as a boon to her mother, Bronwyn said, wishing that the two of them would leave her alone. I will not break my word. You don't have to keep your word to an apostate, Alistair pointed out. According to the chantry. Bronwyn gave him a hard look. Oh, is that what they teach you in the Templars? You get to pick and choose? That is not what my parents taught me. A Cousland's word must be kept, whether to king or commoner. I do understand that Morrigan may pose difficulties, but she is nevertheless under my protection. We are only warning you for your own good, Wynne said, her voice warm and persuasive. I understand that, and I thank you. Alistair, you were trained by the Templars, but you are a Grey Warden now, and Duncan said that Grey Wardens accept allies where they can be found, if it will further our mission. I don't say we shouldn't be careful, but I believe Morrigan will be useful in our quest. And if she uses blood magic? Asked Wynne. Then I shall tell her to stop it, said Bronwyn. Wynne sighed, with an air of resigned worldly experience. Alistair snorted. Bronwyn thought she would like a walk herself. I'll be back shortly, she told Alistair. Then we'll want to get started on the inventory of the Warden's tent. That done, I can finish our supply list. Come on, Scout. You need the exercise. The dog trotted after her, cocking his ears at Alistair in disapproval. There weren't many places to go in the camp, but there was always the quartermaster. Bronwyn headed that way, Scout at her heels, when she heard raised voices. Think yourself too good for an honest soldier, do you? a man's voice demanded. "I offered her 9 silvers, fair and square, going price for a wilder girl, and she turns up her nose. I ask you, is that right?" Another man answered, "Well, maybe she don't like you. Even wilder girls can say no, can't they?" Oh, Andraste's nightgown, Bronwyn thought, glad she was in armor, and even more glad she had put her warden's tabard over it. She picked up the pace, trotting toward the voices. Scout grew alert and started moving slightly ahead of her. Yes, there was Morrigan, surrounded by a little knot of men, some of whom had either not slept off last night's liquor or had started drinking early. One big fellow in heavy chainmail was holding forth in high indignation. "It's a sad day when some wilder barbarian won't take the king's silver for a bit of sport. That's all I ask. Don't a soldier have his needs?" "Morrigan," Bronwyn called out in her mother's most commanding tones, "we have a great deal to do. Come along now, if you please." The men turned, and recognized the tabard first of all, then recognized Bronwyn, saw the black Mabari with his head lowered to charge, and instantly backed off. "What's that girl warden want with some wilder?" the big man muttered, very put out. "Ain't proper." Bronwyn was put out in her turn. How had that stupid nickname spread? The Kingsguard must have told his friends. Somehow she must put a stop to it. It was demeaning. She scowled fiercely at the loitering men. They gave her scattered nods, bows, and even a salute or two, and bustled away, dragging their muttering friend along. Morrigan dawdled over to Bronwyn, smirking. "I could have dealt with such fools myself," she said. "Of course you could have," Bronwyn replied, trying not to be annoyed. "But then I should have had to pay blood money for some of them, and Tan Loghain would have complained about House Cousland decimating his army. Some of these men have been away from home for months, and you are a very beautiful woman. Some men cannot see a woman's skin without wanting to touch it," she added more mildly. She wished that Morrigan would wear mage's robes, or light armor. It would cause less trouble. Or even normal clothing. "'Tis not my fault that men are weak," Morrigan pointed out. "I should not have to change my ways to pander to their lust and vanity." "Perhaps," Bronwyn agreed, "but some men really are absolute sinks of lust and vanity. And they all believe they're irresistible." "That is true enough," sniffed Morrigan. They fell into step together. Bronwyn said, "We're leaving for the circle in a few days. Have you ever ridden a horse?" "Ridden a horse?" Morrigan scoffed. "Why would I ever have done such a thing? Why would I want to?" "Well," Bronwyn said with ever more elaborate patience, "generally I have found I can travel more quickly that way. I would be willing to teach you. I shall travel in my own way just as quickly. Ride your knightly steed if you must. You will find I have no difficulty keeping up with you." "Really?" Bronwyn stopped, wondering what she could mean. "How could you do that?" "Let us see." Morrigan stopped as well, pretending to ponder. "A wolf won't do. Your mongrel may not like that. A spider might alarm the peasants. A hawk, now, that might be just the thing. No one could object to a noble lady with a hawk on her wrist or on her armored shoulder." Awe and wonder filled Bronwyn. "You can really do that? For a long time? It won't tire you too much?" Morrigan assured her, "I can fly as long as you can ride." "We'll see about that," Bronwyn laughed with delight. "I can ride pretty hard." This certainly simplified matters, though Bronwyn thought she would still beg 3 horses from the king. It would seem logical, and they would not want to make a spectacle of Morrigan's abilities, if only for their own protection. The 3rd horse would be useful as a pack animal. But Morrigan, what a wonderful talent! She wanted to know more about this. Loghain was coming back from his inspection of the repairs to the Tower of Ashal when he saw the warden, her fine hound with her, deep in conversation with the half-naked wilder girl. He scowled. From the corner of his eye he saw Alistair leaving the high-ever tent. "Wait here," he ordered Cothrian and his escort. The young bastard saw him coming, saw that he was coming for him, and hurriedly pulled himself together, reddening. "My lord?" Loghain spoke low. "What is that wilder girl doing here?" "Oh, her," Alistair replied, suddenly grasping that Loghain might be an ally in his quest to rid the world of Morrigan. "Well, it's like this.
Bronwyn went to fetch her brother, and the old woman asked a boon for his care, and the boon was that Morrigan is to travel with us as a companion." Seeing the frown on Loghain's face, he added, "I told Bronwyn I didn't think it was a good idea, but she said it was a matter of honor, and she said it in that way she has—" "Enough!" Loghain cut him off. "The warden can choose her company, but if that young woman wishes to remain in this camp, she will put on some clothes. Tell the warden that," he said coldly. "With my compliments, of course." It was deeply gratifying, that look of panicked despair on the lad's face. And then Loghain felt a twinge of memory, of another face so like it, and that same expression, one he had never seen Cailan wear. He scowled and stalked back to his tent. The Knights of Redcliffe arrived that afternoon. Too late for battle, but not too late to hear of it and celebrate it. Arl Eamon had been unwell. In fact, he was still unwell, but he had decided to join the army with his knights. His brother and his retainers were concerned for him. He was constantly thirsty, and seemed to tire easily. It was hoped that some rest at the camp at Ostagar would prove beneficial to him. In the warden's tent, Alistair and Bronwyn heard the commotion of the Jarl's arrival, but were hard at work making an inventory of the warden's effects. Armor, weapons, clothing, keepsakes, money. Much would have to be collected and sent back to Denerim, but not before there was a comprehensive list. And not before looking through everything to see what could be of use to the 2 remaining members of the Order in Ferelden. Armor and weapons were laid on the cots and on the ground. The chests were lined up and would be gone through methodically. The small folding table had been cleared, and Bronwyn had set up pen and ink and parchment for her lists. She had 2 of them, one a tally for coin, the other the inventory proper of the other possessions. Also on the table was the small iron chest, containing the Grey Warden funds Duncan had brought to Ostagar. The key had been found on his body. Treasures large and small were arranged in piles. Bottles of wine and fine brandy and more exotic liquors would be packed in a waiting crate.
"Of course we should be using their things, Alistair," Bronwyn insisted. "It's a way to make their memories live on. I shall never forget Beleriand's name, now that I wear his tabard and helmet. Would it be better to stow them away in a mouldy cellar until the owner is utterly forgotten?"
"No," Alistair admitted with great reluctance.
"But some things we shouldn't touch, like Duncan's things."
"All right," Bronwyn sighed. She really loved Duncan's wonderful dagger.
"We can put them on display at the compound. They will have a place of honor there. We can put his armor on a stand and mount the weapons on the wall. Perhaps we can have a plaque inscribed and hung on the wall as well, telling of his life and deeds. Would you like that?"
"Very much. I don't want anybody forgetting Duncan."
"I agree. I think the plaque should have the names of all the wardens who died here. We won't forget them, Alistair. Duncan's weapons can be displayed as a tribute, but all the rest of this should be put to good use fighting Darkspawn. That's what I would want if I died."
He poked about the tent, looking mournful. Beside her on the floor was the traveling chest belonging to a warden named Ilderic.
"Come and sit here with me."
Bronwyn blotted the quill until the ink was just right.
"It will go more quickly if you'll take the things out of the chest while I write."
"All right. Ilderic. Set of iridium scale here on his cot. A chantry amulet of silver. A silver ring set with a..." Bronwyn looked over at it.
"A blue topaz."
Her pen started scratching again. "Right. 2 silver-eyed daggers with a nice harness of Bronto leather. Eating knife, longbow, dragonthorn. Silver-mounted quiver from Navarra. Arrows."
"That's a good bow," Bronwyn muttered. "I may want that one."
"In the chest are 1, 2, 3 pairs of thick woolen socks, spare small clothes, spare shirt of linen, leather bag with comb and razor, a wet and dirty towel, pouch with coins totaling... some of these are Orlesian."
"Oh, this is interesting. This is an old square solidus from Tevinter. You know what that's worth, because I don't." "Alistair, just tell me about the standard coins," Bronwyn said patiently. "Put the solidus in the pile with the treasure."
"All right. There's 10, 15, 20... 22 silver. A nice gold sovereign from Emperor Florian's time. 2 more sovereigns and..." He counted under his breath. 15 coppers.
3 sovereigns, 22 silvers, 15 coppers, Bronwyn said, adding them to her tally of coin. "Into the money box with them."
There was an impressive clink of precious metal as Alistair poured the coins from his open hands. "How much do we have?" "I'll tell you when we're done." "And a copy of Cassander's Secret History of the Orlesian Empresses. Hey, I heard that was really lurid." "Really? All the gory bits?" Bronwyn wondered. "They're certainly a bloodthirsty lot." Well, that, too. Also really kind of, well, a lusty lot, if you catch my meaning. This book shouldn't even be here. It was banned by the Chantry." "Ooh, I want to read it. I've never seen an improper book before, but my tutor Aldous told me about them. I call dibs." She grabbed it away and put it on the ground underneath her folding stool. "I picked it up first." "You didn't call dibs. I called dibs. It's rightfully mine. Don't make me fight you for it." "Huh," he grunted, annoyed. "Just as long as I get to read it when you're done." The work went on, sometimes amusing, sometimes saddening, sometimes simply boring. Bronwyn had already claimed Beleriand's nicely carved traveling chest and nearly everything in it, "because I need nearly everything," she declared. Beleriand must have indeed cared about his appearance, for she had been thrilled to find a silver comb, brush, and small hand mirror, all beautifully made in a pretty case of blue Antivan leather. His shirts and socks and towels were of the best quality, and he had brought some spare clothes that the elves were already altering to fit their new owner. Breeches of soft black leather, and a jerkin of the same fine quality, also black, but trimmed with more leather of a silvery gray. His hooded black cloak was something she had desperately needed. His black thigh boots fit Bronwyn quite well, as long as she laced them tightly and wore thick socks. In the chest were some leather hair ties, a small flask of lavender oil, a little box of soap, also scented with lavender, an emerald ring set in fine gold, a small but elegant silver goblet and a silver spoon, a compact folding chess set with playing pieces of quartz and malachite, a volume of Orlesian poetry, and a much-loved biography of the Warden-Commander. In a rack of tiny crystal vials there were a variety of poisons, some of which she knew, and some of which she did not. Beleriand had been a person of very refined tastes, more so than most noblemen she knew. She approved of his taste in weapons, too. She had been proud to bear the ancient family sword of the Couslands, but that was Fergus's by rights, and she gladly laid it aside for the lovely curved blade of silverite that had been the elf's. Beleriand was officially her Grey Warden hero now, after Duncan. That was odd, when she thought about it carefully. Bronwyn was accustomed to thinking of elves as servants, mostly. Diligent and skilled, like Dariel, or whining and lazy, like some of Nan's kitchen help. There were also the elves in Highever's little alienage, small and shabby beings who were generally described as layabouts and parasites. She and Fergus had once sneaked into the forbidden alienage, thinking themselves very daring. It had been not exactly frightening, but very unpleasant. It was dirty and smelly and sordid. The elves had not known they were the Terran's children, but saw that they were rich shems and had crowded close, begging for coin. Bronwyn had felt enormously tall and awkward among them, and she and Fergus had hurried away, not telling anyone of their adventure. Of course, the elves had once had a magnificent civilization. Everyone knew that. They were only a shadow of what they once were. Still, Mother had said everyone was different, and so just as there were noblemen and merchants and peasants among humans, it was reasonable that now and then an outstanding elf would arise. Beleriand certainly had been a remarkable person. He had proved himself worthy in the joining, just as Bronwyn had. He had fought well and bravely, and the Wardens had accepted him as a brother. It was right to honor his memory, though she wondered if she would have felt uncomfortable around him had he lived. She would think more about that another time. Alistair moved a different chest up to the table. "So much for Ilderic, poor sod. Here's Talifer's chest. He was from Islay, you know, where the last battle of the last Blight was fought. I might keep his sword. The balance is just right, and it's a bit longer than the one I'm using." Loud voices came from outside, and the curious sound that must have been men slapping each other on the back. "Tegan, it's been too long." Bronwyn recognized the voice of one of Arl Brelin's knights. "Tegan," she said quietly. "That's Ban Tegan, the Earl of Redcliffe's brother, isn't it? I can't quite put a face to the name." "Yes," Alistair allowed, turning red, which surprised her. "Look, there's something I should tell you." "Is it something I'm not going to like?" she teased. Maybe. He was serious, so she became serious as well. Well, he began, and then burst out. I'm a bastard, all right. I grew up in Redcliffe. Eamon was my guardian. She saw nothing to get upset about. Sometimes it seemed to her that half the people she knew were bastards. Is Eamon your father? There's no reason to be embarrassed. Lots of people are bastards. Some of the nicest people I know are bastards. Except for the ones who are right bastards. He granted her a reluctant chuckle. I hope you don't think I'm one of those. No, Eamon isn't my father, but he did raise me, and Tegan was around a lot then. I thought I should tell you now, so you aren't taken by surprise by them. And then you were educated by the Chantry. I'm surprised the Earl didn't train you as one of his own knights. Who was your father? He was so taken aback at the blunt question that he stared at her, jaw dropped. Some sort of secret, I take it, she said. I'm sorry if I embarrassed you. Maybe he was the son of a kinswoman of the Earl's. There must be some sort of scandal involved. Or maybe... She nearly spoke her thought, and then shut her mouth. Alistair looked like the king. He looked a lot like the king. And the king had been worried about him. Looking at him again, she understood it all, she thought. The old king's bastard, given to a trusted advisor to raise. She was only surprised that Tarn Loghain had not taken charge of him. Perhaps that would have been too obvious, if the king wished to keep it secret. The mother must have been very common indeed for the king to wish to keep it secret so long after the death of Queen Rowan. Or maybe King Merrick wanted Cailan to have no rivals. Of course, by making sure that Cailan had no rivals, he had also deprived him of having a brother. And 6 sovereigns, 81 silvers, and 12 coppers, said Alistair, as he poured more coin into their money box. Bronwyn returned to her inventory. Tables were laid under the sky, arranged in a U-shape. The camp cooks were driven to distraction, wondering how they would put anything decent together, but in the end somehow succeeding. At the head table were the king, his nobles, and the wardens. Cailan was faintly disappointed. He would have liked to sit next to the lovely Warden Bronwyn, but he was doomed to have Loghain on one side and Uncle Eamon on the other. It was Loghain, the lucky old war dog, who had the warden's companionship tonight. Not that he would appreciate it. Her cousin Arl Leonis Bryland was on her other side, of course. Arl Urien on Eamon's other side. Really, this army needed more women in its higher ranks. And he had seen to it that Alistair and Tegan sat together. They knew each other, after all, and it would be nice for them to renew their acquaintance. Alistair was a fine fellow, and a warden. It had been wonderful, having a chance to talk with him, just the two of them alone last night at the warden's vigil. He must try to find time to get to know his brother better. Maker! Who was that? In fact, Uncle Eamon was asking him that very question. The camp seneschal leaned over to assist them. That young gentlewoman, your majesty, he said discreetly, is the travelling companion of Warden Bronwyn, or as she was, Lady Bronwyn Cousland. Very proper for a young noblewoman to have an attendant. Cailan looked again at the vision in the dark green dress of fine wool. It was that Wilder girl. Morrigan. No, Morrigan! What a beauty! She was sitting among the knights of Highever, looking queenly and disdainful. He had promised to reward her for looking after the Tarn. Ah, that must be what Bronwyn was doing. Rescuing this flower from the squalid marshes, giving her an environment worthy of her. How very noble and decent to give her patronage. What could he give her? What did he have with him? Yes! He had been meaning it for the Queen, but Anora would never miss it. He whispered to the seneschal, who bowed and set off on the errand. "Do I know you?" asked Ban Tegan Guerin, his brow furrowed. "You do," Alistair assented. "But you'd probably recognize me more easily if I were covered in mud." "Alistair!" Tegan smiled, pleased to see the lad so well. A warden, after all, and only one of 2 who survived the battle. He remembered, and said feelingly, "I was very grieved to hear of the fate of the other wardens. It would seem that the Darkspawn feared them above all else." "It was horrible," Alistair agreed. "My friends, I helped gather their ashes at sundown today. Duncan, you must have met him. He was a mentor to me, and the best of men. Bronwyn thinks that's one of the signs that this really is a blight. Only an archdemon will be cunning enough to pick them off like that. Bronwyn is Lady Bronwyn Cousland, the new warden, I gather. We heard that her brother is here and wounded. Recovering, but not conscious yet. Her whole family was massacred by Al Rendon Howe. Duncan rescued her, and she joined the Wardens. She's amazing. Did you hear how she scaled the Tower of Ashal to light the beacon, with only a mason spike for a grappling hook and 40 feet of rope? Well, my lord, Bronwyn murmured, do you deem her sufficiently garbed to remain in camp? Loghain flicked the wilder girl a glance. The knights around her were making complete arses of themselves. Less likely to start a riot, he agreed briefly. I notice you are still in armor. Was that the only gown you brought with you? Bronwyn almost laughed. I had no time to pack when I came south. The quartermaster found the gown for her. She looks nice, doesn't she? She sipped her wine, slipping him a mischievous smile. The gown and the underdress of delicate white linen, the embroidered sleeve garters, the double belt of dyed and studded leather, all of it had been expensive, but Morrigan had been pleased by the final result. At that, Bronwyn had had to promise that Morrigan could dress as she liked when on their travels. Loghain was well disposed towards Bronwyn personally, but did not smile back. Instead, he growled, "What is she after, hanging about here? And who is this mother of hers? Not a chastened woman, obviously." Bronwyn was feeling warm and relaxed with the wine. "She said her name was Flemeth," she declared, pleased at the idea of surprising the Tairn. Her smile faltered as he caught her wrist in a powerful grip. "Flemeth?" he asked, low and harsh. "As in the abomination of legend, the witch of the wilds? Is that girl a witch as well?" Bronwyn felt a shudder of excitement at his touch, but was angry enough at his questions to draw her wrist away. "She may have some magical gifts. I'm not one to tattle to the Templars. She and her mother have been of great help to me, and they saved my brother's life. I am under an obligation to protect Morrigan." "Then keep her away from the king," Loghain told her grimly. "He fancies her." "Really?" Bronwyn asked in concern. "You don't think—" But she followed Loghain's lead, and saw where the king was looking. A great many men were looking in that direction as well. Morrigan really was very beautiful. Bronwyn sighed, feeling ill-groomed, ill-clad, and only half-washed. "Well might you sigh if Cailan gets a bastard on her." Loghain shot her a glare. "Keep her away from him," he repeated. "I shall, of course. Perhaps I should leave for the circle as soon as Fergus is awake and aware." "A sound scheme," he grunted. All they needed was yet another royal bastard. At least Eamon and Tegan seemed to have kept their mouths shut about Alistair. If Cailan got himself killed, of course, it would be another matter. It was useless to speculate. Arl Brylin claimed the girl's attention, and Loghain concentrated on distracting the king from his newest object of desire. There was feasting and drinking and a great many toasts. Bronwyn was forced to hear of her exploits climbing the Tower of Ashal, related by the king himself. She was beginning to hate the whole silly story. She had been terrified the entire time, and all these warriors were treating her like some sort of hero. It was embarrassing when she was sitting next to a genuine hero, after all. "And in recognition of your deeds," her reward was a dragon-bone dagger of dwarven make, glittering with enchantments. It was the finest weapon she had ever possessed, and she longed to play with it and admire it in privacy. It came in a gorgeous sheath of green and purple dragon hide, with bronze fittings. Looking at it made her shiver with pleasure. Nonetheless, she was a Cousland and a warrior herself, and she stood and made the properly modest remarks, and was applauded, and received another special reward in a gravely approving look from Loghain himself. She sat down, blushing, and feeling a great fool. "I'll say it again. That's a pretty girl," she overheard Arl Wolf remark to her cousin Leonis Bryland. "Wonder why we haven't seen her at court lately." She liked her older cousin, but not at the moment, as he had had a bit too much to drink, and whispered back loudly, "Bryce and Eleanor wanted her to get over an inappropriate infatuation." Bronwyn burned with embarrassment. She had had no idea that her parents had confided in anyone else. Sickened, she realized that Loghain must have heard. He gave no sign other than frowning into his wine goblet. Wolf was shaking his head. Shame the Wardens got their hands on her. Just the last for my eldest. Now, of course. Leonis was agreeing. A scandal when the Wardens make a Tan's daughter unmarriageable. This was appalling. Bronwyn left off even trying to eat, and stroked the lovely dagger in her lap. She felt a light warm breath on her ear as Loghain leaned close to whisper, "If he turns toward Wolf just a little more, you can stick it right in his kidney." She bit her lip against the involuntary laugh, and nodded, not daring to look at him. "Of course what they are saying about being unmarriageable is perfectly true. Unpleasant all the same. I really should go see how Fergus is." He laid his hand over hers. "You cannot rise until the king rises. You know that." She nodded again, resigned. "I know." He lifted her silver goblet for a servant to refill, and then handed it to her. "At least the king always serves good wine." Cailan was enjoying himself immensely. A victory, bittersweet with the loss of the Wardens, of course, but a great victory all the same. He had fought, and fought well. His uncles of Redcliffe were respectful, and all the nobles seemed in harmony tonight. He was about to make some such remark to Loghain, but Loghain was whispering in Warden Bronwyn's ear. Loghain was whispering in a woman's ear. Was Loghain flirting? The sly old hound! And whatever he was saying, the girl seemed to like it. She was blushing. And he was passing her a goblet of wine. Their fingers were touching. Wait until Anora heard about this.